Well, this is a totally new venue for me, so I have some cliff notes here just so I won't probably lose it. But it's a huge honor. I mean, I'm more honored by listening to everything out there than I even thought I would be. I mean, just, it's amazing what this is. And the first thing I thought of was that God is into memorials. I mean, there's a part of me that thought, wait a minute, memorializing the past, but I'm into the future. And but at the same time, my prayer is that sign out there will trigger people as they're going by. They'll find out, they'll go in, they'll begin to listen to that music back there, but there'll be more music born. But God is into memorials. And the first one I thought of was that when Israel was going into the land of promise, the promised land, he had the priest take a stone out of the River Jordan to erect something as a memorial. So he's into remembering. In fact, the three major feasts of Israel are all about remembering. Passover is every year celebrated, and it's a memory of Israel being delivered out of slavery centuries ago, millennia ago. And Pentecost is a memorial of the giving of the law, but it's also to believers. Passover is now a memorial of the season of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, and Pentecost is a memorial of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And Feast of Tabernacles is another one. And so Israel was always, in the Feast of Tabernacles, they always remembering that God was always there providing for them. There was that, I've been looking at that again. Can you imagine every single morning for 40 years, there was a pillar every single morning, there was a cloud up in the sky, and every night there was a pillar of fire up there. They got so used to it, probably it was like the sun coming up. And manna every morning, except Saturday. I mean, hello, they had to realize that God was really with them, and that's what he's really wanting to do. So what happened here was that we tapped into what God was doing. Somebody was saying a while ago, and I appreciate that, I understand what they were saying. You started all this. I mean, I understand what they're saying in that. I was a part of it. But I didn't start it at all. I tapped into what God was doing. I remember during the Belmont days, sometimes somebody would say, well, how can we get a Belmont started here? And I said, you can't. Find out what God's doing and join him. And that's what we did. And we tapped into something, and we also knew that Chuck Smith in Calvary Chapel was further along than we were, because they were baptizing people out in the ocean when the movement was just barely moving here. So we went out in California and visited with Chuck Smith in Calvary Chapel, because we wouldn't know how to keep going and all that kind of thing. And so what happened was that these dropout, casting off all restraints, young people, Jew and Gentile alike, became hippies and were a blot on our nation in a way, overthrowing everything their parents had taught them, didn't want anything to do with what their parents had teaching them. But when they threw over everything, they didn't have anything. And so they started reaching out and looking for some kind of God. And they met Jesus. And so these dropout, turn off hippies became Jesus freaks. And we were a place here who received them, and it was just natural to start a coffee house. So the Jesus movement was still in full swing when I came here in 1971. But I had been connecting with the Jesus movement already when I was a professor out at Lipscomb. So when Bob Kendrick called me, he said, look, you've got the ministry, we've got the place for it, come over here. And so I wasn't really sure I wanted to, but Bob Mason and Al James and all these people thought I was supposed to, and they made the deal, and so I came over here in that year. And it was a time when, I can close my eyes and see it, it was a time when everywhere, all over the city, there were Bibles, that some of them that Nolan Huey made later, but there were Bibles in hand, and there were guitars on back, and they were in Centennial Park, hovered around in some kind of Bible study, and there were flop houses everywhere. And I was reminded a few minutes ago that right down here, there was one of the, I wouldn't call it a flop house, but there was a communal house that was down here right about a block away. And one day during this whole time, I went down there, and nobody ever locked doors. And I walked up, and the door was locked. And I knocked on the door, and somebody on the other side said, put it down, it's Don. they unlocked the door and I walked in and I said, "Put what out?" And then I walked over to Stuart, a long-haired Indian brave, and I took him by the hand and I said, "Look at me." He said, and I said, "No, look at me a long time." I said, "If you can't look me in the eye, you can't look God in the eye." And he said, hippie-wise, "Oh, wow." But, so it was a huge, I mean, Amy thought I told you the story of the stripper. What I really said to her that day was, honey, you put your clothes in the Lord, I mean, you turn your life over to Jesus, He'll tell you when to put your clothes on and when to take them off. But there was another time when the place was always packed. And there was another time when this fella on the front row that didn't have his shirt on, had overalls on but no shirt. Walter Wyckoff, the senior elder, walked over and he said, "Who's the man on the front row?" I said, "He's a guest." He said, "Oh, okay." In other words, if he's a guest, well, leave him alone. But if he's one of us, tell him to put the shirt on. Or there was the time when my Vanderbilt major professor that I had done my doctorate program at Vanderbilt came and he walked out the back door and said, "It was fun being here." And I thought, fun being here? I don't think that was what it was all about. But anyway, but it was also, there were just so many packed houses. But what was also happening was, I mean, even when I was still at Lipscomb, we did this, but we had these huge baptismal pools. One of them was the Little Harpeth River, and one of them was the Grant swimming pool. And then you had there's a whole story about Brown Bannister raising the steel lid on the baptistry up there. It was so heavy that he started pulling it, and he couldn't do it, and people grabbed it from behind him, and when they did that, Brown somersaulted back through the green curtain and still holding over the rope and said, "Well, praise God," and the congregation applauded. So there was all these things like that were happening. But it was fine. But anyway, we were so packed out here that we finally were able to move over. The board of Koinonia asked us, the elders, except that it wasn't all of us. It was not all of us. Because not all of us had been interested in this. So we asked our elders if we could move the whole concert evenings, Friday and Saturday, over to the church building. And they discussed it and said yes. So then the whole thing shifted over there with all the instruments and everything, but people had to stay up all night to get all the instruments out so that we could have worship the next morning. Because at that point, Belmont was a non-instrumental music church. But that all changed with Amy. Amy's the one who did it. Amy very naively, told her dad that she thought she had a song for the evening assembly. And they were just they weren't very big evening assemblies. But anyway, so he said, "Ask the elder in charge." So she asked Russell Gleaves. But Russell Gleaves had been over here all the time with all the concerts. And he forgot, this is church, not concert. So he said, "Of course." So then it became an elders meeting. The fourth week was up, and we only lost one person. But anyway, the die was cast, and so all the homecoming and Dogwood and all the people could not only play over here, but they could play in their home church. But my prayer is that this sign out there will trigger us to a new expression of music. I genuinely believe, and I got it on the basis of the parable of wheat and weeds, where Jesus said that both righteousness and wickedness are going to grow side by side until the harvest. Yes. And what I saw was they were headed toward the most wicked generation in the history of mankind, because wickedness is ripening. But we're headed toward the most righteous generation in the history of mankind. I believe that means we're going to have more miracles, more holiness, more righteousness, more understanding of Scripture. And I believe the greatest revival, by the way, just an aside, I read yesterday about this huge revival that's going on in, of all places, Iran. The people that have been there say that they believe Iran is going to be the China and Korea of the 21st century. One lady handed out 20,000 Bibles and never anyone refused one. I believe we're headed toward, in the United States as well, the greatest revival in the history of mankind. And I want to stay here to be part of that. But if I'm not, I'll be cheering from up there. May that sign trigger us toward greater things in the future. Thank you.